Before the beginning of time, there was Ginnungagap, a bottomless abyss which separated the icy lands of Niflheim and the fiery lands of Muspelheim. These two realms rose in power and clashed. The burning frost turned into water drops, and the water drops turned into life. The first living being was Ymir, a giant who was created for those life-giving drops of water and whose death was brought about by Odin and his brothers. Odin, Vili, and the Ymir's descendants fashioned the Nordic mythological universe from his blood, bones, flesh, teeth, hair, eyelashes, brains, and skull. The Norse gods belong to two major clans, Aesir and Vanir. Odin, Frigg, Thor, Loki, Balder, Hod, Heimdall, and Tyr are the most elevated representatives of Aesir and are known as the main gods. The second clan, Vanir, contains the fertility gods and count Njord, Freyr, and Freya as their most notable members. Despite the antagonism between them, it was necessary for the two families to combine their powers and ideals for all to prosper. On this episode, we talk about the most essential Norse gods and goddesses. Welcome back to Day Talk, fellow talkers, and I believe the Norse mythology is known, at least at some level, to everyone you out there. Either you have listened to various metal bands singing about Norse mythology, the gods, the goddesses, or you have watched and read Marvel, which also includes some version of these Norse gods in this current iteration of the films and TV series. This is also very known to our co-host of the episode, Miss Alexandra from StrikeTheTruth.com.
Hi, Tapani. Yes, I have my Wonder Woman shirt, but I am a huge fan of Marvel and especially of Thor.
Yes, this time we're not going to talk about the versions that Marvel or the Disney's MCU has made of these characters, but we're going to talk about the original vision, the original myths behind these gods and how they were portrayed in the original Norse mythology. We also find out that some of our weekdays, as we know them now, are based on the old celebration and festivities, at least of the name of these gods. Before we start talking about that, please leave us a like. That would help our channel. Also, leave your own comments and thoughts about the Norse mythology, their gods, your favorite bands that sing about these things, or something else entirely. Also, hit that subscription button and the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future episodes on this channel called Day Talk. But let's start with the most known of them, or the most well-known, although it arguably could be his son too. But let's talk about Odin first, the main god, the supreme deity of the Norse mythology, the All-Father of Aesir.
Yeah, of course I know about Odin and a lot of these main Norse gods. When I was younger, I was very much interested in different types of like Egyptian gods, Greek gods, and the Norse gods.
Yeah, and these days, this whole Norse mythology, the Viking culture and history of such things is very popular in popular culture too, not only in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Marvel Comics universes. We all remember the series Vikings from a few years back, and the Netflix has now this Vikings Valhalla that is based on 100 years after the main series ended. And of course, this year came out the magnificent film The Northman by Robert Eggers. If you still haven't seen it, please do so. But what comes to the main god, the all-father of Aesir, Odin, he was always after more knowledge, and he gave his eye to gain more clearer vision of the universe. And he actually was hanging from the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights until he was blessed with the knowledge of the runic alphabet. And this symbol of Yggdrasil, the world tree, is even these days very popular on different kinds of jewelry, logos, t-shirts, and such things. I believe I have seen that you have such a emblem yourself.
Yeah, actually, you are right. I have one, and it's right here. So this is Yggdrasil. Looks very much like the Tree of Life from, I guess, is it Hindu or Eastern beliefs?
Yes, these kind of myths about the big world trees, the Tree of Lives, and such things were very popular in different kind of mythologies. Odin was always after wisdom, and he was a god or the god of wisdom. Also, he was, and I think this is pretty controversial based on the wisdom, he was god of war and poetry.
That's actually an interesting combination. It sounds like he suffered a lot for the knowledge that he gained from losing his eyes. And from what I heard, he had 2 ravens, 2 wolves, and 2 Valkyries with him on his quest for knowledge. And wasn't he famous for riding into battle with a 8-legged steed?
Yeah, called Sleipnir. And he had his dwarf forged spear Gungnir, which he said never missed a target. And what comes to this god of war aspect of Odin, he was never too interested of what was the reason for the battle or who was right or who was wrong. He was all about the battle. And this just I mentioned because I just rewatched Marvel's the first Thor movie, where Odin is, appearing in front of the frost giants with his 8-legged steel and his spear there, and he's all about justice and fairness there, and they really portray him in a different light in the MCU, which isn't that surprising at all. But I'm just saying that's a different way of telling about Odin and different iteration of Odin at all. Odin enjoyed the war and good battle.
So in a way, he just was interested in fighting and not interested in justice or what was good or wrong.
Well, we have to remember that the Viking culture, which gods these Norse gods were all about dying in the battlefield. That led you an access to Valhalla, which was basically their version of heaven.
Yeah, and from what I know, it had to be an actual battle that you died. You couldn't die from a battle wound, for example, recovering in a bed or, later on in an accident. It had to be by your opponent's hand, in a way.
What's interesting, the Odin had at least 5 sons by 4 different partners. And his best known son, of course, is Thor, the god of thunder, which was conceived with Jord, the personification of earth itself. His wife, Frigg, bore him Baldur and Höder, and with Jötner, Gridr, and Rindr, he sired Vidr and Vali. So that's a bit of a mouthful of names right there.
Yeah, that's a lot of sons from a lot of partners, but I guess that Jord was his main wife, maybe, or
no,
main love.
The Frigg was his main wife. What comes to the mythology?
Okay, so
the stepmother of Thor.
Yeah. So then I guess Thor was just lucky to be the most famous son.
Yes. I promised to tell you guys about the days and their connections, the name of the weekdays to these gods, and Odin has such name. Odin in the other languages was known as Woden and is the source of English word for Wednesday. The Anglo-Saxon culture that was dominating the England, the island of England back in the day, was naming this day Wednesday after Odin. So the Wednesday is Odin's day.
And isn't Friday from Freya, the fertility goddess?
It comes from Frigg, the wife of Odin.
Okay.
Friday, Frigg's Day, which we're gonna talk about next. So, as mentioned, Odin's wife, the main wife, the most powerful being after Odin in Asgard, was Frigg. She was the mighty Norse goddess and was sitting on the throne right next to Odin, and she was the only one who could do that.
Okay, that's interesting that we have such a powerful wife, but he had 3 other women to give him sons.
Talking about sons, the Frigg was mother of Balder and Höder, as we mentioned, and she was gifted with the power of divination. She was also revered to be as the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and the household, marriage, and all domestic matters.
I guess in a way I can see why she was such a powerful goddess, because in most, even modern Wiccan religions, let's say, there is always the god and goddess, and they're both equally powerful because they represent the masculine and feminine side of humans. And if you look at Frigg, it really shows that she is embodying all these feminine qualities that people in those days really revered, like family, marriage, fertility, which was very important. And, you know, she had sons, not daughters, which at that point, all the men wanted an heir.
That is true. And on top of that, and going with along what you mentioned there, she was portrayed to be a very, very protective mother indeed, that would go on any lengths in order to protect her family and kin.
And I guess back in those days, from what we know, is that in Scandinavia, men and women were quite equal, and they both had quite good fighting capabilities. So I'm not surprised that Frigg would be a very protective and probably quite strong woman.
Yes, the mythology portrayed her as such, and I think it gave a good basis for the Vikings and the Viking culture, which was, as far as I know, more equal between men and women than many other cultures on such time. And we're, of course, talking about the Viking Age, roughly around the first millennia. Yes, let's go to the most well-known after Odin, or beside Odin, Thor, the most famous of Norse gods these days, and the main character in one of the main characters in MCU and the Avengers series. He is the Odin's son, the god of thunder, and his characteristics were that Thor was quick to anger, and he was set to protect Asgard and Midgard, the realm of humans, from Jötnar and other threats. And in Norse mythology, these Jötnar were giants, and the giants were the enemies of men and gods.
And I guess like what they showed in the last MCU movie was the Love and Thunder. He was mainly traveling on a chariot pulled by two goats.
Yeah, that was actually based on the Norse mythology too, although these goats were a bit more uh, crazier in this iteration of Thor in the MCU. But these two goats in the Norse mythology were named as Tangrisnir and Trangrjöster.
Very difficult names.
Of course, the Thor is best known of his dwarf forged hammer called Mjolnir. And this is not just any old hammer, as the fans of Norse mythology or the MCU out there know. This is one of the most powerful weapons in the existence of the 9 realms and the universe. And it is even capable of flattening mountains. What is actually interesting about it is that the archaeologists and the researchers have been able to find many hammer-shaped pedants across Scandinavia. And of course, Scandinavia being the area where Viking culture was strongly in charge on the old days. And they have concluded that the most of these hammer pedants and hammer logos and hammer, runes and drawings are based on the Mjolnir, the Thor's hammer.
Of course, I guess people would like to have that power to themselves that Thor's hammer had. So they would depict it in various pendants. And even these days, it's very popular. Like you see it a lot in the Christmas markets and medieval markets in Finland. They forged them.
Yes,
the ironsmiths forged them.
That is true. It's very, very popular indeed, even these days. And in Finnish culture, we talked about Kalevala. We have Ukonvasara in our own culture, which is Ukko, Ukkosen Jumala, the god of thunder, which is a bit similar to Thor in our own mythology. Like his father and stepmother, Odin and Frigg, one of the weekdays were named after Thor. Can you guess what day it is?
My favorite day, Thursday.
Thor's Day, Thursday, and this is also, of course, also because of the Anglo-Saxon culture that prevailed in England back in the day. Okay, let's go next to Heimdall, or Heimdall as we know him from the MCU. Very popular and well-known god from Asgard, and he is the one who controls the Rainbow Bridge that connects the lands of mortals, Midgard, with the lands of gods, Asgard. And he has a horn known Gjallarhorn, which he blows to warn of impending trouble. His senses are so good that not even wool grow on a sheep or the grass grow on the ground without him noticing that.
That's a very good sense. That would probably be quite distracting in everyday life.
Well, this is his strength, and that's why, because he is so perceptive, he is put in charge of the bridge and in charge of the Gjallarhorn, so he can warn if something is threatening the land of the gods or the land of the mortals. He sees all the way in the ends of the world.
Very powerful god then.
Heimdall is the son of 9 different mothers and is known as the White God.
It's very interesting that he had 9 different mothers. I'm just wondering how that would work, but I guess it's, gods and they work in mysterious ways.
I guess at least he was well taken care of. There was always someone to look after him when he was a kid. That's as far as I know about that thing. But Talking about mothers, let's talk about children more, and let's talk about Balder and Höldr, the god of light and radiance. Balder and the god of darkness, Höldr, the twin brothers, twin sons of Odin and Frigg, and the stepbrother of Thor.
That's a very interesting pairing for twins, light and dark.
Very convenient. And on top of the light and dark, one of these brothers is also tied in one of our Christmas traditions, which we're going to talk about next. Balder, the most beloved of the gods, who once had a nightmare that he would be killed. His mother, Frigg, as we know, who was very defensive and very protective of all of his kids, demanded that all of things in the world, all of things in the 9 realms that would probably harm him needs to vow that they can't harm Balder in any way. Unfortunately, there was a one thing that didn't swear, and that thing was a mistletoe.
Okay, now that's an interesting story, because how can mistletoe hurt you?
Well, I'll tell you how. We all know Loki, the god of mischief and trickster, that he was convinced Hödr, the twin brother of Balder, to throw a spear of a mistletoe towards his brother. And that mistletoe pierced Balder's heart, and thus Balder ended up in the realm of the dead. So this mistletoe thing that we have in our tradition, that kiss under the mistletoe, originated basically from this myth, and originally was nothing to do with any romance at all. It was sort of a show of a friendship, that no one would be harmed type of a thing.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. So did Balder then end up dead?
Balder,
He ended up in the realm of the dead.
yes, he ended up there, but when the Ragnarok, the day of judgment, the end of the world happens, the realm of the dead will open. All of the dead are risen on the last day, and when Odin dies, Balder and Höldr will rule in his place. And I guess Loki is shit out of luck on that day.
I would think so too.
Let's go to Loki. In the comic books, of course, Loki's adopted brother and arch nemesis of Thor, the god of thunder. And in actual Norse mythology, the things aren't similar at all. He is the son of Laufey and Jotun, Farbati, and is Odin's blood brother.
Well, if we look at this particular pairing, I think we can see another opposite. So we have Balder and Höldr, the light and dark. In this way, we have Loki and Odin, because Loki is known as the god of trickery, mischief, and the father of monsters. Complete opposite things to what Odin is known for.
Yeah, god of war, wisdom, poetry, and such things. He was Loki, I mean, he was the father of monsters, and he sired a vicious wolf, Fenrir, and the serpent, Jörmungandr, as well as Odin's 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. On top of this, he also fathered the goddess Hel, who reigns over the realm of the dead. And this Hela, in the MCU, was sister of Thor and Loki.
Well, I think MCU maybe had a bit of a artistic license with that particular relationship. But then again, I can see where Hel comes from.
Yes, we're gonna talk about Hel last here, but before we do that, I must mention that Loki is not usually considered one of the Aesir to his trickery. He caused, among other things here, the death of Balder, as we know, with the mistletoe trickery. And the Aesir can never be sure whether he's assisting them or hindering them. So they don't really trust Loki at all. And who could blame them?
Yeah, I can see. I mean, he's probably powerful, but definitely an outsider. I guess these gods were kind of seen as the best characteristics of what humans wanted to be. But at the same time, they needed some kind of balance on the bad characteristic sides that people didn't want to be like. So they needed some examples.
I think you're on the right track there. And last of the gods that we are talking about today is Hel, also known as Hela. And she is first as two-faced terror, ancient goddess of the dead, presides over the realm of Niflheim within the place of the same name, which served the basis of Christian concept of hell.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Norse gods had Hela, because if you think about the Roman gods and even the Greek gods, they had quite similar or equivalent god. Was it? I don't remember the names now, but at least in Egyptian was Osiris, the god of the dead.
Yeah, it seems like all of these places, including the lands of the dead, in this case Niflheim, and in your case the Osiris who ruled the land of the dead, they always had someone to look after those places, and they somewhat were evil characters. And talking about evil here, Hel is greedy, capricious, and uninterested in the concerns both of the living and the dead. In some Icelandic sagas, she is depicted as a half-blue, half-flesh colored, with a gloomy appearance. However, some historians believe that Hel is not actually a person at all, but rather a place. Outside one of the sagas, most references to Hel are being in rather than being with. It is believed by some that the name Hel actually meant grave.
I guess, you need both the land of the dead and maybe someone to rule it, so it could very well be both. Like you said, most religions or those pagan religions back then had a god. Not necessarily, I wouldn't always say that they were bad, because from what I know, Osiris was all about the truth and justice, and they were balancing the soul versus their deeds. But yeah, I can see it being both.
What do you guys think? Were these gods, the goddesses of the lands of the dead, Niflheim, etc., evil persons or evil gods or something else entirely? Leave your thoughts about the gods under this video in the comment section. Hit the thumbs up for liking the video, ring the notification bell and subscription bell so you won't miss any of our future episodes, and thanks for joining us.
Bye.